Hello everyone. I want to show you guys how to use Wine to set up custom prefixes for games that are distributed in a non-traditional fashion. In this video, I'm going to be setting up and installing STALKER Anomaly, which is a game/mod that is distributed as a package on ModDB. With some minor tweaks, this will also work for repacks of games that you own, or running abandonware that isn't available through Steam or Good Old Games or something similar. This process accomplishes basically the same thing that Winetricks does, but all you need to do this is Wine, a file manager, and your terminal. If Winetricks works for you, that's great. You don't necessarily need to learn this process. However, this is a great way to get an understanding of how Wine works and give yourself all the tools you need to get basically any Windows application running on Linux all by yourself. This video is Arch-oriented, but these instructions should suffice for distros like CachyOS, Manjaro, EndeavourOS, or Garuda Linux as well. This guide may also be useful for Steam Deck users who are looking to play non-Steam games or don't want to use Winetricks for whatever reason. A quick note, you're going to want to make sure that you've installed and updated your graphics drivers, along with the respective lib32 packages for your graphics drivers. If you're new to gaming on Linux or you just set up your Linux operating system, this is one of the first things you should do when setting things up. I can make a video on how to do this in the future if anyone is interested. First off, here's how to install Wine on an Arch-based distribution. If you've already installed Wine and ensure that it functions properly, you can skip to the following timestamp. First, we need to double-check that the pacman multilib repos are enabled. This is located in etc/pacman.conf. Once you've opened that config file in your text editor of choice, you can scroll down to this multilib section here and uncomment these two lines. Ensure that you uncomment the lines that say multilib and not multilib testing. Once you save and quit out of that, you can go ahead and run a full system update. You can then go ahead and install the main Wine packages with sudo pacman-S wine Winetricks, as well as Wine Mono and Wine Gecko. These packages will give you everything you need to get most games up and running in Wine. Since we did that system update earlier, now would be a good time to reboot your computer. When Wine installs, it sets up a default prefix that is hidden in your home directory. It's generally best practice to make a new prefix for each game we set up, although we can usually get away with putting similar games within the same prefix. I like to think of a prefix as a little mini containerized Windows install that contains only the essential libraries you need to get a Windows game up and running. I generally like to keep all of my Wine prefixes in the same place. In this guide, I'm going to be setting up STALKER Anomaly, which is a free package you can get on ModDB here. The download is under the Files tab. I'll show the process of extracting the package here, but it's very simple. I'm using ARC here, which is included with KDE Plasma, but you can use 7-zip or whatever you prefer. Once we have our game files extracted, the first thing we want to do is create a folder that will contain our Wine prefix. I'll note that due to the nature of Wine prefixes, paths can sometimes get really long, so I do my best to keep these directories as short as possible. In this case, I'm going to use home, games, and then anomaly prefix for my prefix folder. Next, you want to run the following command: Wine prefix in caps equals, and then the absolute path to your prefix. The absolute path is just the path starting from the root of your file system, so that'll be the full path to your Wine prefix folder. After that, you can type wine cfg. This command will set up your prefix and also open a little window that lets you configure it. In this case, we're going to ensure that Windows 10 is selected and just click OK. We can use the same command in the future if we need to change the configuration of this prefix for whatever reason. If you take a look inside of your prefix directory, you'll notice that there's some stuff in there now. If we look inside of the Drive C folder, we'll find something that should look really familiar if you've used Windows before. Now that we've set up our prefix, I'm going to open my downloads folder where I extracted the anomaly game files, and I'm going to open another window that contains the C drive of our prefix. I'm going to rename the anomaly game files folder to anomaly 153 just out of convenience. Now I'm going to move that folder into the root of our fake C drive by cutting and pasting it. I recommend avoiding any of the program files folders in your prefix. Now that our game files are in our C drive, I'm going to use Winetricks to install some of the necessary Windows components so that our game runs properly. I've included the Q flag in this command to avoid having to click through a bunch of useless dialogues. Here, I'm just going to select the default wine prefix and then install a Windows DLL or component. For STALKER Anomaly, we need to select D3DX9, D3D Compiler 43, D3DX11 43, and DXVK. There's two ways you can do this. You can select these components through the Winetricks GUI like I'm doing here, or alternatively, you can just append them to your Winetricks command and install them all at once. There was a time where Wine would fail at installing lots of different Windows components at once, but these days I don't really have any issues with it. I'll note, if you're installing something other than STALKER Anomaly, the Winetricks components you need may be different than what we install here. I recommend doing a bit of research into the game you're trying to run and what components are required. This can be tricky at times, but I've provided some resources in the description that should help. If you have the same kind of mild Linux brain damage that I do, this really can be the fun part of getting games up and running in Wine. So from here, we can technically run our game, but what I highly recommend doing first is writing a short little bash script that lets us control the launch parameters for our game so it launches the same way every single time. I'm going to open a terminal inside of our anomaly game directory, and then I'm going to tell my text editor, micro, to make a new file called runner.sh. You can name yours whatever you want. Then I'm going to write a little statement, which is hilariously called a shebang, that tells the script what shell to run this command in. This long command here is what tells Wine to run our game. I'm going to break this command down for you guys by working backwards. This longer path at the end of our command is just the directory of our anomaly launcher.exe. Then this Wine part here is just invoking Wine to run the exe. At the beginning, Wine prefix is telling Wine what prefix to run the exe inside of. Including this long command inside of a bash script saves us a lot of trouble in the future. We wouldn't want to type out this long command every time we want to boot up STALKER. Notice that I created this script inside the same folder as the anomaly launcher. I like to do this because I've run into permissions issues in the past when I run the script from a different directory than the Windows binary that I'm trying to run. We're going to leave the script just like this for now, but I'm going to come back to it later to show you guys just how useful these little runner scripts can be. Inside our text editor, I'm going to save, and then I'm going to quit. And then I'm going to run the following command to make sure that this runner script that we wrote is executable. Now we can finally run our game. You can just run it from your file explorer, but since we're launching this game for the first time, I'm going to run it from the terminal, so if there are any major errors, we can see what went wrong immediately. After some loading, the game boots up just as you would expect it to. I'm going to embarrassingly select the batteries instead of the bandages because they kind of look like the bandages from Shadow of Chernobyl. I play with my settings for a second here, but then I save and quit out of the game, and I return to the runner script we were looking at earlier for some quick optimizations. So since we're using DXVK to translate DirectX into Vulkan, we have the ability to use some of its handy features like DXVK HUD and frame rate limiting. I'm going to add this DXVK HUD equals 1 and DXVK frame rate equals 60 command above our long Wine prefix command. I'll provide a link in the description to the DXVK GitHub that has a list of all of the various commands that you can evoke for DXVK at the beginning of your runner script. Additionally, I really like using this thing called GameScope. It is a micro-compositor used by the Steam Deck with some quality of life features I really like. I'm going to add the following before our wine command. GameScope requires some setup that I'm not going to get into in this video, but I can make a future video on setting up GameScope if anyone is interested. I'll save our runner script, I will quit out, and then run the script again just to check that everything works.